Welcome to the 6.2 Curriculum Preview for EDU 683. I'm very pleased to be with you today, and we're going to go through this step by step like we have on the other assignments, because this is so important that you understand the depth that is needed for this curriculum. Even though it's called an outline, it's going to have a lot more depth than you and I usually would use in an outline. Remember, this is something that an administrator will look at to review your curriculum that you are trying to get them to purchase. So it's very important that everything is included. I'd like to go over just a few things first. Remember that you're not going to use the SNHU logo at the top. You'll create your final project on a plain Word document. And also, APA Style 7th edition does not call for running heads in student papers. Please use only the UBD Curriculum Structure Outline template as required in the guidelines for this assignment. Do not launch off on your own. Do not add any levels to the outline. All right? Let's begin. The first thing you'll want to do is just put your achievement gap statement. Nothing else is needed here. As you can see, this student has said, the focus of the curriculum plan is to address the reading comprehension and vocabulary gap between students from low socioeconomic status and their higher SES peers in the first grade. She has all of the elements there. She has the comparison of the low and high. She has also given us a grade, and she's even been specific about the course subject. So one sentence is all that is needed. No support. All right, then we start in with the curriculum concept. This section is not to support the achievement gap. You need to discuss strategies that you will employ in the curriculum to bridge the gap. This research should support the instructional strategies, not the gap. You have already proved a gap exists in the literature review, and in the final project, the full literature review will come before your curriculum. So right here, we're going to start off by letting the reader know what this is. This is the focus of the curriculum plan, and it's an implementation of best practices. And then she goes on to be specific in reading comprehension using informational text and explicit vocabulary instruction in a regular self-contained first grade classroom. This is an excellent opening statement, because she has given us in a nutshell what she is now going to use research to prove. She says, based on extensive research included in the literature review, because that's the main sources you want to use, and she lists and cites the particular sources that will be used to support the correlation between SES differences and vocabulary acquisition and reading comprehension. She goes on to continue to support this idea. Remember, this is a support for the strategies, and this may be as long as you want, but I suggest a page would be enough, because it is an outline. But this is very, very important, because if your administrator does not see that this is supported by current research, they might not even read any further. So that's a very important part. All right, now let's move on to the units. Even though you're only going to send in one unit for the 6.2 assignment, in the final assignment, you'll have to have 2 units. And some people would like to go ahead and tell us a little bit about the first unit and the second, but it's not necessary. It's just what this student did. So in this place, it's sort of like you were talking to a parent, and you're going to say, well, what we're going to study for the first 8 weeks is going to be such and such. So she says the topic for Unit 1 is continents, countries, and maps. The main goal for this unit is for students to be exposed to a variety of informational text about the topic and to learn and apply comprehension strategies such as, and then she lists the specific strategies that will be covered only in Unit 1. Students will also be building and expanding vocabulary knowledge through strategies, and then she lists those. Excellent overview. You don't need to support this with any research because you already did that in the concept. All right, the next place is the learning theory, or if you have multiple theories. No, you do not get extra credit if you have 2. So just tell us what you think will be the most important theory that you will use. And please remember that there are some things that are not considered in the traditional sense a learning theory. And one of those is collaborative learning. This is not a theory, it is a strategy. And collaborative learning is, or cooperative learning, either one, is based upon an educational theory. And Vygotsky's social learning theory, Piaget's theory of cognitive development, and Keegan's cognitive developmental theory. So you could use any of those 3 and then still have cooperative learning as part of your strategies. Just wanted to make that known. Okay, first of all, she states what theory will be used, constructivism. Then she defines what constructivism is, and she does use a citation, and I would want you to support the definition of whatever theory with a single sentence from a reputable current author. All right, so you do have to put research in the theory section. You can see she quoted a couple people. All right, so that's the introduction to your whole curriculum. Now we're going to get in the specifics of Unit 1. And please notice that we're going to have you do the introduction to the unit, and that's Roman numeral 1, and then just ABC, and just list the answers here. The title is going to be Continents, Countries, and Maps. The grade level is grade 1, and it's 8 weeks long. Now, this entire curriculum that you're going to write for the capstone needs to be for an entire semester. So that means it needs to be 8 to 12 weeks. If you plan to have 3 units, which is acceptable but not required, then you'll have to split up those 3 units into 4 weeks. But generally, most of us will do 12 weeks, and you'll do 6 weeks at least for one unit and 6 weeks for the other. But it can be any kind of combination. Just remember, it is for an entire semester. All right, so that's all we put in the introduction. No text, just no explanation. The second one is when we begin to use the UBD, Understanding by Design, stages. Stage 1. In Unit 1, the established goals are connected to the Common Core state standards. The essential questions are focused on, etc., etc. She writes down what these are. Now notice, this is a narrative. I do not want a list of the essential questions. This is an overview of the essential questions. But this is the most important sentence. By the end of the unit, students will be able to. This is the sentence that I expect you to have in there. By the end of the unit. And then tell what you expect the students to have learned by the end of the unit. And this should be reflected in the standards that you select. And that's what you do in number 2. The following Common Core State ELA and Speaking and Listening Standards. Now, I know some of you are working in preschool. You might have to go find national standards. Even if your school doesn't have any standards, go get the national standards. If you have, if you're teaching science or music, go to those organizations that create their own standards. But you have to have someone's standards, and it has to be a reputable source. It cannot just be your objectives. These are standards. Very, very important. So you see that she has quite a few. I would not really suggest, especially for young children, to have quite this many. What these standards should be are not everything that's going to be covered, but only the new standards that students have not been introduced to will be included here. I know some of your administrators want every single standard that you might address, but in this outline, you don't need to do that. All righty, number 3. Now, a lot of people miss this, guys, so heads up here. Okay. This is where you are going to tell us about prior to beginning the unit. What kind of pre-assessment will you use? You may look, as she says, by reviewing students' performance on previous assignments and standardized tests. It's okay to put that, but you don't have to. But this is the most important. All students will be given a pre-assessment. And this pre-assessment needs to be of your creation. So this says to measure their previous knowledge of the skills needed to be successful in the unit. This assessment will be an oral question and answer class discussion. So it doesn't have to be formal. It can be informal. But you have to pre-assess your students. And you have to tell us what it's going to be. Don't just say there's going to be given a pre-assessment. All right? Then number 4, and a lot of people miss this one too. Sometimes it's not easy to understand what is being asked for because they have left it vague because they want you to be able to put some of your own self and have the professor be able to define this. So that's what we're going to do. So section 4 in stage 1 is to be a section where you will show how you will use the pre-assessment and baseline data to modify, change, or enhance the unit. All right? So you need to answer that. There's going to be 3 things. I can get this turned on again. I don't know why it goes off sometimes. Okay. Oh, still giving me a problem. Oh, I haven't picked the color. There we go. All right, sorry about that. You are going to look at how you're going to use that pre-assessment. So she says the data from prior performance and the pre-assessment will be used to adjust and modify the initial plans. Now that's fine, but I want concrete things. So for example, if most students are proficient in predicting and making inferences, then less time can be allotted to directing teaching this skill and more time allotted to other less proficient skill. This data will also be used to identify areas that could be strengthened through extra exposure and practice during center activities or small group instruction with the teacher. So you see that these are specific things that the teacher will need to do after the pre-assessment. Some of the other things that students use is they will be divided into, if you're doing reading, maybe reading groups, or you will address a certain skill that is vital, and if your whole class or most of them do not know that skill, they haven't mastered it, then there'll be some reteaching that might be needed. But that's what you put in Stage 1, number 4. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to Stage 2. And maybe we'll change to blue. How's that? All right, now Stage 2. The first thing you're going to talk about are formatives. These formatives need to be something that you create. Now, you can also use some other things, like she says, one of the main sources of formative assessment will take place before, during, and after read aloud activities from the student book. I do not know what the student book is, but it is probably their reading series. And that is okay. But I do not want that to be the only formative, because I want to see that you have created a formative. And I'd like to see more than one, because this is what you're going to be using as formatives for the entire 8 weeks. Remember that. This is not just a one-shot deal. This is what you're going to be doing. So she says some of the formative assessment strategies will be used as the KWL chart and 4 corners to assess prior knowledge, turn and talk or yes and no responder cards to check for understanding during reading, and exit tickets or wraparound circle as closure activities to reflect and reinforce the learning from the lesson. Using the read aloud approach from first grade students, particularly students from the lower socioeconomic background, is strongly supported by the Common Core state standards. Research outlined in, and then they go on and quote. This needs research. All right, Stage 2, formative, must have a research citation that supports the type of formative. It's not just you need a formative to measure such and such. No, this is specific. And it's very, very, see, it says the read aloud approach. That is what she's going to cite. And that's why it is so very important that you have in your literature review these strategies, because these need to be from your literature review, the research. Okay, so that was number 1, formatives. Now number 2 is the summative assessment. And we'll use pink for that. How's that? Okay, now an end of unit summative assessment is allowable. It's not particularly preferred, because I really would like you to use an authentic assessment with real world parameters. But if you'd like to do in Unit 1 a summative assessment, that's all right. But in Unit 2, you had better have something that's not from a book and that is not fill in the blank or multiple choice. I think you can get some ideas. You're all experienced teachers, but if you have problems and you cannot come up with a summative assessment that will measure the state standards you listed, call me and we can talk about it. All right, one part, it's going to be administered in 2 parts. So one part is a traditional testing format that's made up of 10 multiple choice questions where the teacher reads the questions and answers choices aloud. And the students circle a picture on their response page. Excellent. I want to have that kind of detail. Remember, the administrators who are reading this, they need to know what kind of an assessment you are outlining in this curriculum. And research here is coming in again, because summative needs to be research outlined in the Common Core has shown that listening comprehension far surpasses reading comprehension in the primary grades, and states that it is particularly important that students in the earliest grades be read to. All right, so the teacher's going to be reading in this summative assessment, and that is the correct kind of research to support that. And then in addition, she's got another one because they're also going to use pictures or images. So I hope you understand that this should be detailed and supported with research, preferably from your literature review. All right, number 3. And 3, let's go back to yellow. All right. Now she starts out with number 3, and let me make sure you know what number 3 is. This is, again, how will you use the data to assess the learners. And she starts off with a quote. You do not need to have research here, but she has chosen to give us research. The most important thing is you're going to tell what will the formative assessments tell you as a teacher. She says the formative assessments will be most useful data to frequently and easily check for understanding along the way and make adjustments to the lesson. So that's what that's the kind of data she's going to get. She goes on to say it will clarify misconceptions and provide immediate feedback. Then the summative, now tell what that's going to do. The summative assessments will enable measures of growth of individual students as well as the whole group. So these are very, very important that you do the formative and the summative in number 3. Number 4, this is like it was before. How will you plan to use data from assessments to modify instruction? You need to list specific ways you will restructure or expand the instruction. And they have to be specific to this unit. I'm going to say this, and I probably will say it again. You cannot use any text in the first unit over again in the second or the third unit. Everything has to be original text. Because when you buy a curriculum, they are very expensive. Sometimes they even have to be renewed, the price, every year with updates or something like that. So nobody wants you to copy the same thing from one unit to the next. Now you and I know that repetition is very good for students. Well, it is assumed that a teacher will replicate or repeat assessments or instruction as needed. It's not to be a part of the curriculum, though. The curriculum says in 8 weeks, students will do this. And then the next 8 weeks, they will do something different. Now, in real life, what happens? Students don't all get that, so there's a little carryover and you change, but that's not the kind of curriculum that you write or that you buy. So just remember that. Nothing can be the same. There has to be different standards, there has to be different research, and there has to be different text. All right, number 4. Data derived from ongoing formative assessments will be used to monitor the pacing of the lessons, to provide additional reteaching sessions when necessary, or adjust the activities. Data from the summative will be used to determine whether a student should be given another opportunity or alternate approach. So this teacher, this curriculum is saying, look, if they didn't get it, let them do it again. You might not want to do that, or your administration might not allow it. But this is one thing that you can put in number 4. Now, stage 2 has a number 5. Don't miss this. There are 5 different sections in stage 2. This is where you talk about technology. This is the technology you will use to administer assessments or collect data. So you're only going to talk about what you're going to use. Now, if you've never used technology to gather data, this is your time to branch out because it has to be in this section. So she says digital tools such as Kahoot and Google Forms will be used for some formative assessments, and then she names them. Please be specific. Then she says Google Slides or PowerPoint will be an option for students to use design their postcards for the performance task portion of the summative. Very important that you say not only what digital tools will be used, but you also will tell about how these will be used. Where will they be used. Don't just name that they're going to be used. Okay, moving on. Finally, stage 3. Let's see, what color should we? We'll go back to yellow. The key principles of universal design for learning, UDL, and make sure that you spell it out before you put the abbreviation, include providing multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression in order to optimize learning for all students. This is an acceptable definition, and it should be cited. Do not make up your own. Go find one. And for those of you who were smart enough to listen to this, I will tell you, you can use this exact one if you'd like to. I'll allow you to use this whole sentence in Unit 1, Stage 3. Now, you'll have to find your own in Unit 2 because it's got to be different. All right, then, this is the most simple way to do this section. Multiple means of engagement will be provided by colon and bullet it or even put it into a narrative, but engagement, establishing high standards, having students engage in this and this. Now, this is very detailed. You have to do the same thing in Unit 2. So you might want to use all of them in Unit 1. I would say use 3 and then save the rest for Unit 2 because they cannot be repeated. It has to be something new. And I will check, guys. I'm really fanatical about that. You should know that by now. So all of these need to be different. So if you use half of what she has in Unit 1 and the other half in Unit 2, that's fine. Now remember, all of these things must be specific to Unit 1. Do not repeat them. And do not use, except for the first sentence, anything that she has here, okay? No copying allowed. All right, this is now number 2. We're going to talk about incorporating differentiated instruction. And this also has to have a research citation. And she says, Carol Ann Tomlinson names content, process, products as components that are differentiated in the classroom. This is a little bit longer than I like to have a quote in an outline, but I'm not going to mark you off. Just telling you, you don't have to have something this long. All right, and then she's going to tell us what differentiation will she do in Unit 1, and it is not going to be the same as she's going to do in Unit 2. She says a focus on the target standards and unit objectives along with ongoing data analysis will be key. So this is what she's going to differentiate. Content will be differentiated through the use of different genres, leveled resource materials, and a variety of supplement materials. Again, this is specific. Don't just say it's going to be differentiated. You must tell us how, and it's got to be different in Unit 1 as in Unit 2. All right, now we're down to 3 in Stage 3, and this is technology. She has put 4 here. I didn't notice that before, but there is no 4. So, you can cross that off. I don't know if I have a cross off thing here, but there's only 3. I'll write that here, okay? I'll highlight that. Only 3. She starts in as noted by the U.S. Department of, oh, I see why she has a 4, because this should have had a, this should have had a closed parentheses here, because this is her, I believe this is her research here. She's got a para, and then she has 4, but no closed. Okay, sorry about it, guys. I didn't check that out earlier. Okay, so she has the noted by the U.S. Department of Education, and I really wish she hadn't put ND. On these, some of these websites where you don't find anything, look down at the bottom And if they've kept it up to date, or if they stopped it at 2020, whatever is in the footnotes way down at the bottom of the page, especially if it's something like the Department of Education, please use that. Do not put ND in this. All right, so here in this section, we're going to talk about technology, but it cannot be the same technology that you used in the other one. It has to be different, because now you're going to talk about technology to support student learning as well as teacher implementation. So not only are you going to tell us what the students are going to use, but here we find out for students it is a place where everything, we're talking about Google Classroom, they need to help them learn, complete task, review lessons, access material, or communicate with the teacher is organized and accessible 24/7, no matter where they are. So this particular task is going to be for not only students, the benefit of Google Classroom, not only for students, but the teacher. And here again, she talks about the platform, and she says for teachers, it is a tool to increase productivity, streamline information, and collect and analyze data, and personalize learning. Oh, okay. Now, that's all you need except for your references. And you are going to have references, because some of this does require research. This is all that is necessary. But let's see how many pages this is. I'm sure it's well over what the rubric calls for. And remember that I really want to make sure that you know that every assignment except for 7.2 and 9.2 have no limit as to the length for my course. Now, you might get to your capstone and they go, oh no, it's way too big. Well, that's your problem later. But right now, don't worry about that. Just get the information down and do the best job you can. Okay. Thank you so much for listening and bearing with me for a whole 30 minutes. I appreciate what you're doing, and believe it or not, I can see a difference in the material that you are submitting on these drafts than I have in other classes. So thank you for listening and doing exactly what is required. Have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.